Elimination System Program, otherwise referred to as the acronym NJPDES. Please know that this session is being recorded, and the recording and PowerPoint materials will be posted online. As you may know, this is the third, turn on the recording, okay. As you may know, this is the third stakeholder meeting for the most recent round of NJPDES fee rulemaking. We thank you for your feedback thus far. We have taken the information from our prior stakeholder meetings and have a more concrete direction regarding the development of this proposal. The purpose of this meeting today is to update you on the current status and to gain any additional feedback. Next slide. This slide just shows some basic housekeeping items regarding the operation of Microsoft Teams. Please take a moment to mute your microphone if it is not muted already. We will have a question and answer session at the end, and we ask that you hold questions until that time. This presentation encompasses 19 slides in total to give you a sense of the material. Next slide. Here is an overview of the NJPDES permitting program, which offers some basic information on what the program regulates and the types of facilities that are regulated. In short, the NJPDES program exists to regulate discharges of pollutants to the surface water and groundwater and to protect public health and the environment. This is accomplished through the issuance of NJPDES permits. The reason we are here today is to discuss the development of NJPDES permit fees, where this process is defined in rule. In order to make any changes to the NJPDES fee structure, a rule revision is required. Next slide. Here is an overview of the goals and objectives of the proposed rule. First, we're repealing the entirety of the existing fee subchapter and replacing it with a new version. Second, these new fees will be more predictable, addressing the concerns of the regulated community over the years. Third, these fees will be more efficient for the department to administer and be representative of the impact that a permittee's discharge causes. And fourth, the new structure will be both more transparent and equitable, ensuring all members of the NJPDES permitted universe pay their fair share of the cost to administer the program. Slide 5. Okay, NJPDES is a fee-supported program, meaning that the fees we collect must correspond to the estimated cost of processing, monitoring, and administering the permits. The NJPDES fee program is required by statute to assess fees commensurate with the cost to administer the program. I am now going to turn the presentation over to the rule manager, Brian Sage, who will provide an overview of the current NJPDES fee structure.
Brian, you're on mute.
Thanks, Thomas. The department is responsible for the calculation and assessment of NJPDES permit fees in accordance with NJAC 7:14A-3.1. Fees are calculated based upon the minimum base fee and the environmental impact formulas outlined in the current rules and are issued for individual permits, general permit authorizations, and certain certifications and registrations for discharges to surface water, groundwater, stormwater discharges, significant indirect discharges to POTWs, and/or the use or disposal of residuals. The current rule also requires the department to prepare an annual NJPDES fee schedule report and provide for a public hearing on the report. The final fee report is filed in the New Jersey Register along with the response to comments received during the public hearing. The existing rule contains formulas for the calculation of the minimum base fee as well as the environmental impact for each discharge. The environmental impacts are calculated differently based upon the type of discharge, such as discharge to surface water, discharge to groundwater, etc., and take into consideration the potential risk of the discharge on the environment. The calculated minimum base fees are currently outlined in the existing rule and are derived from total hours allocated in administration, processing, and monitoring for each permit category and upon total personnel costs. The department previously attempted an initiative in 2013 or 2013 to update the minimum fees, but unfortunately that initiative was not successful. Over the years, various issues have been identified with the current fee structure. Such issues include the overly complex formulas which lead to the unpredictable nature of the fees assessed from year to year. The current fee structure is also inequitable to individual permit holders that pay a disproportionate share of the fees, since the minimum base fees for all permit categories, including general permits, have not been updated since 2007. Another consideration in this rulemaking initiative is the elimination of the annual fee report process. The department spends considerable time and resources every year on the preparation and publication of the annual report. Next up, I believe, is it Andrew or Thomas? I'm not sure.
I'm up next.
Okay, next up is Andrew on,
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Koski. I'm a regulatory officer in the Division of Water Quality. So I'm just going to give a brief substantive overview of where we are currently at with this rule proposal. So first, I'm going to talk about individual permits, and then we'll get into general permits. So first up, for individual permits, they can be broken down into two broad categories, tiered fees and flat fees. So this is something that's new, obviously the tier fee structure, and this would cover most permits, most individual permits. So this would be things as listed there: discharge to groundwater, discharge to surface water, SIUs, residuals, landfills, discharging to groundwater. Now these tiers are going to be based on one of a couple different factors. It depends on which factor is applicable to that permit. So, for example, some tiers would be based on the 3-year average discharge flow rate, 3-year average residual use or disposal rate, or landfill acreage. So we understand, obviously, those factors aren't going to be applicable to every single permittee. These will be, say, for discharge to surface water, you would have a 3-year discharge flow rate average. For residuals applications, it would be the 3-year average residual use or disposal rate. So just to kind of give you an example here, for a discharge to surface water permit, the first tier may be 0 to 5,000 gallons per day discharged, or 10,000 gallons per day discharged, and have an associated fee. Then you may have tier 2 would be maybe 10,000 to say 50 or 60,000 gallons per day discharge, and have a associated fee with it. In addition to these tiers, major facilities would be subject to an additional fee. This is in recognition of the additional effort that the department has to put forth to administer those facilities. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, major facilities are those that meet the EPA's rating criteria as a major facility, or PTOWs which is a publicly owned treatment works, with a design flow in excess of 1 million gallons per day or greater. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the majority of permits do not fall into this major facilities category. So that's our tier fee structure. The flat fee structure, it's flat fees. It's relatively self-explanatory. This would cover things like combined sewer overflow discharges, stormwater discharges, and residual transfer facilities. We are also proposing new flat fees for permits under the sludge quality assurance regulations and MS4 permits. And for MS4 permits, it's a flat fee, but the fee will depend on whether it's a small, medium, or large municipal storm system. And those definitions, small, medium, or large, are defined in the rules as they currently exist. Next slide. Okay, so we just talked about individual permits. Now we're going to go to general permits. The majority, as they are now, will remain flat fees, but the department is proposing to update some of the flat fees for general permits to more accurately reflect the cost of administration. As Brian Sage had said earlier, some of these have not been updated for a while. So most, again, are going to be flat for general permits, but some we are proposing to have tiered general permits where we believe that is appropriate. And this is in areas such as municipal and highway agency stormwater general permits. And those will be based on, the tiers will be based on population for municipal and highway mileage for the highway agency stormwater permits. We also are proposing to add in fees for newly issued general permits, such as the wood waste recycling and leaf compost general permit and the farm labor housing permit. These were general permits that were very recently promulgated by the department in the last, I believe, year or 2 years. Both of them were issued. And for general permits that are issued in the future, they're not going to have a corresponding fee in the rule, and we are proposing to address that by having their costs depend on the most stringent level of control required by the permit. So examples of controls, for those unfamiliar, are effluent limits could be one control, monitoring only is a different control, best management practices is another. And each, depending on which of those controls is required by the general permit, that would dictate a fee, which would be a flat fee. So just to kind of give you an example, an effluent limit, that's a more stringent control than, say, monitoring only requirement. And the fees will reflect that difference in stringency between all the controls. Next slide, please, Brian. Okay, so as Sue had mentioned early on, one of our goals here is to have a more predictable fee structure that enables permittees to plan into the future, which is somewhat difficult now under the current structure. So as Sue also mentioned, we must charge fees that are commensurate with the estimated cost of administering the program. And in years past, it has been difficult for the department to keep up with fluctuating costs when the fees are set in rule. And of course, those are hard to change. This, of course, has made it difficult for permittees to budget ahead into the future and have some predictability built into their budgets, which was an issue identified in our previous stakeholder meetings. So our proposal to remedy this is to have a automatic annual fee adjustment. And this will ensure the fees collected do accurately reflect our estimated cost to administer the program. And the way this works is there will be something called an annual fee rate increase, and that will be based on a known percentage. And that percentage will will only change every 3 years, and it will go up and down based on the factors that most affect the program's costs. So that's things such as staffing levels, salary, and inflation. So every 3 years, this percentage will change. It'll be based on a defined formula in the rule. And once the number is adjusted, it won't adjust for 3 years. And in the following 3 years, the fees in the rule will go up or down depending on that percentage. And then after those 3 years, the percentage is reviewed again, depending on staffing levels, salary, and inflation. And that'll again change the fees. So with this, there'll be a longer planning horizon, the 3-year planning horizon for permittees, and that builds in some predictability. And it also helps the department follow its statutory mandate. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Thomas Brinkman for an overview of the anticipated impacts of this fee reform.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Brinkman, and I'm working in the Office of the Assistant Commissioner for Water Resource Management. As many of you know, in the past, the NJPDES program was funded by both permit fees and an appropriation. As the graphic on the present slide demonstrates, the fraction of the total NJPDES program cost covered by appropriation varied from year to year. You can see that in some years, such as fiscal year 1995, 22% of the total cost of the NJPDES program was covered by appropriation, and in other years, such as fiscal year 2004, only 4% was covered by appropriation. Due to budgetary constraints, the fraction of the cost covered by appropriation was eliminated in fiscal year 2005. So starting in fiscal year 2006, the entire NJPDES program cost has been covered by permit fees. As you can see, that's starting here in 2006, going to present day in 2023. While this appropriation contribution was eliminated, the fee exemption for nonprofits and public schools with NJPDES permits still remained, however, meaning that the cost for the processing, monitoring, and administering of their permits was effectively borne by fee-paying entities. So continuing this fee exemption for certain entities that are currently exempt would run afoul of the objectives of this proposed rulemaking of making the NJPDES fee rules more equitable for all permittees. Therefore, the department is proposing to not include the existing fee exemption in the proposed fees subchapter. Next slide, please. As you can see on this slide, we want to provide a bit more context as to the breakdown of these currently exempt entities and what these currently exempt entities may expect to pay under the proposed rules starting later. As you can tell, of the 148 entities that are currently exempted from fees, they have a total of 252 fee assessments among them. The reason for this is some entities have more than one NJPDES permit, and some, like say public school districts, have more than one school with an NJPDES permitted discharge. Of these 148 entities currently exempted from fees, 86 are public school districts, 6 are non-public nonprofit schools, 29 are religious nonprofits, and 27 are other nonprofit entities such as YMCA camps. The type of permits that these currently exempted entities are subject to vary. Some of these are individual, like discharge to groundwater individual permit, or general permits like the 5G2 basic industrial stormwater permit. Now, to give you more context, the average assessment for the 86 public school districts under the proposed rulemaking would be $3,677, with the highest school district assessed fee being $11,500 and the lowest one being $500. For the non-public nonprofit schools, the average assessment would be $2,758. The maximum paid by one of those entities would be $5,000, the minimum $900. For the religious nonprofits, the average assessment would be $2,462, the maximum being $5,000 and a minimum being $900. And for the other types of nonprofits, the average assessment for them would be $2,307. The maximum amongst them would be $8,000 and a minimum would be $900. Next slide, please. Now, taking a step back, this slide contextualizes the discontinuation of the NJPDES permit fee exemption with the entire NJPDES program budget. As you can see, there are an estimated 5,949 NJPDES assessments for fiscal year 24, covering a proposed budget of $21,957,000, up from the about 20.2 million in fiscal year 23. Now, these 252 assessments for entities currently exempted that we went through on the previous slide equal 4.2% of the total assessments for all of fiscal year 24. So these 252 assessments, which total about $500,000, would equate to about 2.1% of the NJPDES program budget. that is spent on processing, monitoring, and administering their permits. And finally, the department would like to note that it understands the strain that some permit fees may cause on certain registered entities, and the department is committed to establishing a program for fee relief, therefore. Next slide. Brian or Sue? Sue,
All right. Yes, thank you. So we're time for Q&A. Anyone have any questions, feedback? Peggy?
Yes, thank you. I really just wanted to find out if you can give any more detail on the relief program, how that would work.
Thank you, Peggy, for that question. As of this time, we don't have any additional information about the fee relief program to share, other than the fact that the department is committed to exploring these options. Thank you.
Can just to follow up, would the relief come in the form of shifting that burden to other permit holders?
Unfortunately, we really don't have any more information to share at this time, other than we are committed to working and exploring a fee relief program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
James Schultz?
Hi, yes, good afternoon. Jim Schultz with the New Jersey Dental Association. I was calling, my question centers around the amalgam waste rules for dental. I know this is part of the rule. We have had discussion about since the DEP's rules were initially implemented, we have since had supplemental rules, actually overriding rules at the EPA level. And I had requested previously that the department defer to the EPA rules surrounding amalgam separators and waste. And can you please provide a status update for that?
Yeah, and Jim, thanks for that question. I'm very well aware of that. My group, the Bureau of Surface Water and Pretreatment Permitting, fields the calls from the dentists, and it's tough, right? And then, of course, the state rule came out, and then the federal rule came out. So I can tell you that we have made some changes there. I'm not quite sure how much I can say, but we are aware that the New Jersey went a little bit ahead of the federal requirement. So we have made some changes there to potentially relieve some of those requirements.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. And I know I had provided that information as a supplemental in a previous stakeholder meeting. So we do appreciate any consideration that you would give to kind of following those federal rules. I think that would provide continuity across the country and not make us more of an outlier in the market. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. And I'll just add one other thing, and that is we've also been coordinating with the folks that do the X-ray inspections.
Yeah.
So know that we have done a pretty holistic dive into that issue.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Dennis Palmer?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is going to the percent increase. I think the 2014 proposal had a flat 3% or a number to that effect that would go up every year. It sounds like you're reintroducing benefits, overhead, and salary increases, which will bring back a little bit of that unpredictability when each 3 years comes along. As far as that, going to Peggy's question, I think the 14 proposal had, I think, a 5% discount for public agencies. Are you looking to do something along those lines? And going back to the increase, any thought of just picking a flat number so we all know way into the future, because we have to project, you know, our municipal budgets, or when we go to DCA, looks out 5 years. It looks like we're going to have only a 3-year window, that we have some understanding where our fees are going to be.
Ryan, I'm sorry, Thomas, do you want to bring that slide back up? I think it was Andrew's slide.
Oh, wait.
I think we passed it.
Yeah, we passed it.
There's one more, right?
Yep, that's it.
This was this is tricky, right? So we try to, so it's truly a variable quantity, but we try to make it predictable. So I think that what we're sort of where we landed is somewhere between those two worlds. Is that a fair characterization, Thomas?
Yes. Yeah. I think Dennis, to your point, addressing first your question about why we can't just pick a number and stick with it over time, as Andrew mentioned when he was presenting these slides, the underlying factors that affect the NJPDES budget, staffing levels, average salaries, which in turn are impacted by things such as the fringe and indirect rate, over which the department, we should note, has no control. Those vary from year to year. And then there's obviously as well the inflation, the impact of inflation, which impacts the cost of other goods and services we require to run this program. So we can't run with a single percentage. We have to adjust it, and we have to adjust it knowing that these underlying variables do not change in a linear fashion. And so looking at it every 3 years, we found to be the best middle ground, as Sue was explaining, that we review it in a time frame that is long enough to give some additional forecasting ability to all permit paying entities, but not so long as to under overshoot by a significant margin what the cost of the program is. So 3 years is really what we found to work the best. And this formula we have is very robust and is the calculation of which would be published every 3 years.
I guess my issue is you don't have the ability to calculate the fringe number is what you get from Treasury. But you do have a choice to use the entire fringe number. Over the years, just looking at the numbers, they always seem to be out of line. I mean, the building's got to be paid off. It's been occupied since the late 80s. I mean, Treasury, I'm assuming, is using a fringe number that's a statewide number. Is it a department number? And that's what some thought. Again, you get that number from Treasury. I think so. You don't have a choice on that calculation, but you have a choice on how much of that number you use. And that's my point. So I don't want to belabor everybody's time, but that always seemed to be the number as I went through the calculations for the last 20 years was way above inflation and really drove the number. And it kind of reintroduces that whole, we don't know where we're going except for maybe 3 years. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I saw Dennis Hart's hand up. Back to Peggy.
Yes, and the inflation calculation, will that look, will that be looking back on the previous 3 years, or are you trying to predict inflation expected over the coming years?
I can take that question. We will not be trying to predict inflation. We are we are not as smart as the folks at the Federal Reserve. We will be looking at historic inflation and combining that information, those historic trends, with, as I mentioned, the change in staffing levels and the change in the average cost per employee, because those two, the changing staffing levels and the changing cost per employee, are really the two main drivers of the NJPDES program cost. Inflation mainly affects the cost of goods and services such as computers and other materials we need. So inflation in the formula we've created is not regarded as important as the changing staffing levels and the change in salaries.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to say, and as you know, I represent the Association of Environmental Authorities, and I appreciate the effort to make this more equitable, because as you may know, that's something that we've been concerned about for a long time. And we're glad to see that you're trying to make that a more fair system. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha Jones.
Hello. Going back to just the slide regarding the individual permits regarding the additional surcharge for the major facilities. And sorry if you already covered it and I missed it or was, discussed in previous meetings, but is there any, I guess, additional information you can share regarding, how that's calculated?
You mean for the tiered fees or the flat fees?
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, the tiered fees.
So
I mean, the second bullet kind of explains it, and then there's I don't know, there's kind of a fair amount there. I don't know.
yeah, I think I could provide a little more info. So it would probably be in the form of a percentage, which would be reflective of the additional time and effort, costs, et cetera, that's associated with administering these permits to these larger facilities. That's something we're still examining exactly what we would fall onto, what percentage, but it would probably be a certain percentage of the overall fee that's dictated in the tier, and potentially up to a certain point only. There would be a maximum of some sort. But it's dependent on in the end how much extra work the department has to put out for these facilities. But as far as a specific number, they don't have that at the moment.
Okay, and would that, thank you, and would that, I guess, approach or the calculation or whatever, would that be included in the rulemaking to comment on?
Oh, of course.
Great. And then Dennis Hart, who had to jump off, he sent me a quick text. He was in a hurry, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna ask this correctly, but I guess he was wondering if there's any way that you could, I guess, share what a typical $200,000 permit fee payer could be expected to pay under this proposal. I don't know if that's quick estimate.
Unfortunately, I think it's a pretty customized
Mhm.
formula. I mean, we've got some basic factors, but I don't know if we could
Round a number.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at this point it's difficult to say. With the restructuring and adding in these a tiered structure alongside of flat fees, it's going to cause some permittees to go up, some down. It's kind of difficult to say at this point.
Okay.
But I think in general it'll be more predictable. So how about we say that? Mike?
Thanks, Susan. Just, I know you said at the beginning that the PowerPoint here will be available. Is there any opportunity before the department posts it, like that we can get it? I need to, on some of the board members on the State Chamber board, I'd like to share this with them in advance of that. Unless you tell me Mike's going to be on our website tomorrow. It's just curious at the timing.
Chelsea or Ryan, do you have a sense of the timing for posting this, or maybe Thomas?
We can post this on the stakeholder materials website as soon as tomorrow. That's typically what we do right after the meeting. So we should have the recording and the presentation in PDF format up on there shortly.
That's
thanks,
great.
Thomas.
Thanks.
Mike will also follow up directly with invitees today or attendees today and send the slide deck out.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Just, I have other folks that have delved into NJPDES over many decades that I want to share this with. All right, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? No more questions.
Peggy and
there we
Sam.
go.
Yeah,
back
There we
in.
go. Peggy, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I do have one more, which is, will the formula be available to comment on? I mean, I guess when you formally propose the rule, but anytime prior to that, will we be able to see the formula itself?
Probably as part of the rulemaking package, right, Ryan?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Andrew,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, for the, you're talking about the formula for the rate increase?
Correct.
Yes, that'll be, yeah, of course, that'll be part of the rule package and available
Okay,
for
but you
comment.
don't have it available sooner than that? Like with this PowerPoint or anything like that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Samantha?
Yeah, and sorry again if I missed it. Did you share any sort of goal or time frame that you were looking to get this published by?
Yes, Sam, we are currently in review and finalization right now. So I think the broad answer is the proposal is under review. It has been developed. And then we're just going through kind of our final steps here before publication.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Dennis?
Timeframes? What kind of timeframes are we looking at? So we've all been waiting since 2014. So, and I'm also with AEA. I forgot to mention that earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, we understand.
Yep, same answer, Dennis. Yeah, sorry, I don't have any more clarity on that. Some of the review processes are out of our hands, as you probably know. So that's kind of generally where we're at. So I guess please stay tuned. But we are close. I will say that.
Did you have another question, Peggy?
I just wanted to tell the department that we are more than happy to have you all do a workshop or come to our conferences or whatever when you finally do adopt the new fee schedule, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So please feel free to to use AEA to help people understand it.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? All right. Well, we really appreciate everybody's time and participation today, and we look forward to sharing some more information when available. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.